Good morning, evening, afternoon, or night, depending on when you're watching this. My name is Jeff, and you're joining me in space, along with some of my closest friends that I have met working in VR. We're putting together a podcast that we're calling VR 9 to 5, and essentially, the reason we're putting this together is because no one else was doing it. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to convey to you something that we've all discovered over the last few months. Some of us have been doing this for years, and it's working 40 hours a week in virtual reality. We're using an application we called Immersed that we've all discovered, many of us from some of the others that are in here. And it's an application that allows us to not just work with virtual screens in front of us, but work with friends that, honestly, I've never met any of the guys that are here face to face, but we meet up every day, like coworkers who all work at different companies. So we're putting this podcast together to kind of give you an idea of what it's like working in virtual reality, what the benefits are, some of the things that we see as maybe being the future, and to kind of give you an idea of what our experiences are. Throughout the podcast, you may see us doing some crazy stuff with our hands. That's just there's some little motion things to mute yourself or move your screens, that kind of thing. Don't be bothered by that. It's just natural to us. Once you come and join us in here, it'll be natural to you too. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you to VR 9 to 5. This is our first episode of what we hope to be many. And what we wanted to do with our first episode here is really kind of start out with the question of how did we get here? Why are we working in VR? What brought us into it? And so to kick us off, I actually am going to start with the person that brought me into working in virtual reality. Dave, I came into this by watching a YouTube video that you had put together. Actually, you've got several of them out there talking specifically about Immersed, but I would love to hear from you and what it is that is really kind of what led you here, and then maybe tell us a little bit about what you were expecting and what you got that you didn't expect out of VR.
Sure. So just like I kind of influenced you to start in checking out Immersed and seeing what it's all about, there was a gentleman by the name of Paul Tomlinson who really influenced me and motivated me to check it out, see what it was all about. Paul Tomlinson, or P-Tom as he's known around here, has been using VR for a very long time, longer than any of us. And he wrote an article in late 2021 called Working from Orbit. You can actually see this article if you go to a browser and you type in working from .space. That link will pull up his article that he wrote back in late 2021. And that article sort of sent shockwaves through a lot of people, myself included. And I was in that article. Paul talks about his experiences working in virtual reality, and in specific, working inside of Immersed, which is where we all are today. And he had been doing it full time for at least a year. I don't remember exactly how long he'd been doing it, quite a while. And I was enthralled by that article. It just, I had to get a headset and try it out. And in very short order, I was working in Immersed full time, all day, every day. I'm a software developer, and so I write code, and everybody knows software developers, the more screens you have, the better. So in Immersed, I can have 5 screens, and they can be the size of IMAX movie theater screens, and I can have them in this environment or others like it, fanciful environments or professional environments and whatnot. And I just love the productivity that it gives me, being able to eliminate any distractions, any visual distractions, and just really immerse myself in an environment and have my screen set up and do my work in here. So it's been a game changer for me. It literally changed the way I do my work. My actual work has not changed. It's the way I do my work has changed.
Right.
And it also.
What were you into the VR before that? Were you playing games and doing different things, or did you go out and get a headset specifically for work?
Well, I'm not going to call myself a gamer because my last game system was an Atari 2600 back in the late 80s. So no, I was not a gamer. I had not ever used a a VR headset. I actually borrowed a friend's headset to try out Immersed and fell in love with it, and got my own headset and used the Quest 2 for over a year. And then now I'm using the Meta Quest Pro on a daily basis. And I did it all just to work in VR. To this day, I still don't play very many games at all in VR. With one exception, we have a regular sort of standing golf, mini golf using. We use Walkabout Mini Golf, which is a fantastic, really fun social networking kind of golf program, and we do that every Wednesday. So an hour a week I do that, but that's about it. I really don't do anything else in VR other than productive work for my employer.
Dave, you mentioned you came in here mainly for the screens. What's been your biggest surprise about working in VR?
Well, okay, so I worked probably the first 6 months just in solo rooms, just by myself with my beautiful big 5 screens, and I love it, and everything was great. Another user, I believe her name is Nicole Valentine, wrote an article about the benefits of co-working with other people in VR, and I found that really interesting. I was kind of afraid of that. I'm sort of an introverted person, and I, masquerading as the occasional extrovert, but it's my natural sense is to sort of shy away from that. And I that article motivated me to give it a try, give the public rooms in Immersed a try. So the public rooms are very much like what you see here in this video, where there's several people and we each have our own screens, and I can only see my screens. Nobody else can see what I have on my screen. So it's private, but yet you're in the room with somebody else, and you can have conversations with other people that just spring up. And I was surprised at how much I love that. So now I'm in the public rooms for at least a portion of every day, at least a couple of hours. If I really need to put heads down and super focused work, I'll go to a solo room. But I love the social aspect of VR, and that was a big surprise. I did not expect that at all.
Was your thinking basically, how could it possibly make any sense to go and sit alongside a bunch of avatars, a bunch of random avatars? How could that help?
Exactly. That was my sense. And actually, one of the other users, he's not here today. I'm sure he'll be here on a future podcast. His name is Jeff Weiser, or Jeff Go-to-Market as we know him. He introduced me to the concept of body doubling. And what that means is I'm working on my things. Michaela, let's say, is working on her things. We're not interacting. We're not doing anything collaborating in any way, but just by the concept of us being in the same space together increases both of our productivity. You can Google body doubling, and there's lots of articles on this. It's really good for people who have ADHD and whatnot, but there's I really feel that. So like when I'm in a room with other people, I'm just naturally more productive. Sometimes conversations get a little boisterous, and that hurts productivity. So you have to have self-discipline and know when to exclude yourself from a public room. But in a normal sort of setting in the public rooms, there will be periods of casual conversation, and then it'll quiet down, and it'll be 20, 30 minutes and nobody says a word, and we're all just hammering away at our work, and it's remarkably productive. There's just this weird sense of accountability that just sort of happens just by being in a room with other people. So it's I love it. It's really exciting. I'd love to.
You mentioned something about you're a software developer, and I think most of us that tend to work in VR tend to be nerds, but we have one specific member of this group who maybe you're a bit of a nerd, Michaela, but you actually you're different than the rest of us in that that's not what you do professionally. I would love to hear your story on how you got here, because yours is so unique.
Well, okay, thank you. I am Michaela, and I am a former project manager working for a Fortune 10 company, and I decided that it was time to take a sabbatical from the corporate world because I just needed a change of pace. And I discovered Immersed because I bought a Quest 2 headset only for Beat Sabers. All right. That was it. That was all I was going to do. I was going to get some exercise and I was going to write. Okay. And I discovered in the menu that they had productivity apps. And I'm like, productivity? No. So I downloaded a bunch of them and I issued a productivity challenge. I wrote a number of articles on Medium about working in VR. And I kind of struggled with Immersed at first. But eventually I got some great help from one of the members of the Immersed staff, that's Ryan. And an amazing thing happened, gentlemen. I wrote 76,000 word novel. And,
Holy cow.
And in VR. At least half of that was in Immersed. Okay. But the thing about Immersed that most people don't talk about is that it's a productivity app that is also a social app. Okay. There's a Discord group, and almost every day I see people. If you're not in Immersed, we're talking amongst ourselves in the different threads, and I have gotten so much support from the online community, and it's been just eye-opening and amazing. You need something, you ask. There's a thread for that. I actually feel very comfortable talking to every person that I meet in Immersed because we have created or are in the process of creating a co-working, innovative culture that leans heavily on let's get it done, but how can I help you? And so right now my book is ready to go to the beta readers. After the beta readers, it goes back to my editor. Chelsea will do her standard slice and dice. And then after that, I've got a cover creator, a blurb creator, and by the middle of second quarter 2023, that puppy will be out in the market.
Nice.
If I needed to lock myself down, I locked myself down. If I needed just to be around people, I could be around people. And, you know, this co-working space is unlike anything ever that I've discovered in my life. Okay. If I was in an office setting right now, right, you would hear conversations going on over here and over there and over the pod wall. And if I was in an office, I could close the door, but I'd still hear people. Here I have the option when I need to be around people, I can be around people. If it gets to be a little bit too much, I can take myself into another environment, or I can turn my volume down, remember to turn off my own speaker. Twice I've forgotten to mute myself, and the people in the room have been really nice and saying, you know, that sounded like a great, you know, character.
It was like our audiobook with the author reading it to us.
Yeah, it was
That's
awesome.
right.
But I gotta tell you, this is the most inclusive environment that I know of, and I spend as much time as I can here.
You know, you hit on something that I highlight to people too, and you know, it's emerging technology. It's new. It's not exactly normal for a lot of people. A lot of people haven't even put VR headsets on. But when you get in, you get started, and you hit a roadblock. I've never seen a company that has 24/7 support, pretty much like Immerse does. I mean, there's somebody always on that Discord answering questions from Renji all the way down to Ryan. Oh, sorry, Ryan. But and then you throw the community support. So many members will share how because everybody kind of goes through the same progression and kind of encounters a lot of the same things, and everyone is so happy and anxious to help everyone succeed. So there's nothing to be gun
100%.
shy about as long as you just ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and Michaela, you said something that I think is that was really interesting. Was you said when you need to be around people, and that's kind of been kind of the big, like Dave, you talked about it was a surprise, kind of like kind of meeting people here. I didn't come into working in VR with that expectation at all of being around people, but I don't think I realized that when I working from home, how much I kind of needed that interaction. So it's a really good point that I've found that this actually kind of fills a need that I've had to have people to interact with, other than through Zoom and Teams and all the other things we do. This is just, there's something more personal about seeing people's facial expressions and all that. Yeah.
Well, and I think a huge part of that is the organic nature of it.
Yes.
Like, you can be there and working away and hear somebody talk about something, and you just stop and you talk to them. Or you hear somebody say, oh, there's this issue that's showing up. You don't have to go read something or hope somebody responds to your chat or hope that you saw an email. You just hear somebody talk about it. And it helps things move along. And then you build those friendships. It's so much more organic.
Yeah, it's incredible. This is I've had a big issue working since COVID started, right? I'm a big cultural guy. I love the culture. I love being in an office and being able to interact with all my colleagues and watching what everyone's doing, knowing who's who, and just that just submerging yourself into culture. And when COVID started, when we had to work through Zoom and through these online mediums, I felt like I completely lost a sense of culture. And
disconnect. Disconnect.
Exactly. And so when I came into Immersed, this has been I don't even work with you guys, and this is the first time that I have felt like I'm part of a culture once again. Right? And that's so exciting to me because there's two parts of work, right? Your actual job and the people that you're working with, right? It's two completely different mediums, and working in VR is the first time in 2+ years that I have felt that cultural aspect again, right? Which is incredible.
I keep accidentally calling you guys my coworkers, but we don't even work at the same company.
It's true. It feels like it.
So true.
It does.
Another incredible part about this whole cultural aspect is, and I've had the pleasure of being able to meet Dave in person. And Dave is the exact same person in person as he is in VR. When I met Dave, I felt like I already knew him. He's got that exact same beard. He looks the same. He acts the same.
That's right.
And it's incredible. And this community is so cool. I'm sure Michaela's met Dave, right?
Yes.
And I'm sure other people in here have met. If they haven't, we'll meet soon. And we're all going to realize the same thing, that you are very similar in VR as you are in person.
Yes, Michaela and I had coffee in Milwaukee.
I was going to say, one of the things that we talk about is kind of we've all met as strangers to one another at first. But Gavin, you actually have an interesting story because you lead a team of people and you're trying to bring it into your corporate culture as someone who's using VR in kind of a different way.
Yeah, so echoing a lot of the existing sentiments, I'd say particularly what Cliff was talking about in terms of this disconnect that was there. COVID hit us just as it hit everybody else. I started a new position inside of the middle of 2021, and COVID meant that we could not be together, just couldn't do it. It was forbidden. At least I'm here in the UK, based out of Scotland, and the rules were no, unless you have an ironclad reason to be there, you're not going to be there. So we had to figure out the whole remote thing, and it was very tough to onboard like that, particularly when you have a situation that hasn't been really tailored for remote working. Everybody had to figure it out, and everybody did a varying kind of amount of good works for that. But then I knew from my own experience that VR was something that I totally enjoyed. It's the thing that got me through lockdown and COVID. And just like with Michaela over here, it was like the reason to get this thing was sport. Because, when you're locked down in New York City, which is where I was, it's like, well, what am I going to do? I've got to do something. sport was the thing that got me through, but I realized that it had a lot more potential than that, and I wanted to see if there was some way I could bring that into the workplace, because this whole togetherness thing, it had a lot of potential there. So I basically made the case of doing a small pilot with a new team that I was forming, and said, we're going to do all of our kind of scrum ceremony inside of VR and see how that goes. And so at that particular time, that was inside of, this is not an immersed ad, that was inside of Meta workrooms, and we were using it for meeting purposes. And that was kind of like a team of 4 people equipped with the headsets, and we kind of like went forward from there. Things evolve as you kind of go through that. We expanded it to the rest of the company, and we're trying to figure out how best to make use of this. I think an unexpected thing for VR, particularly in terms of bringing VR into the workplace, is it's not for everyone, right? I'm just making the assumption that because I love it, everybody's going to love it. But some people just can't kind of like really do it. They don't like the thing, having the thing on their head. The feedback was very negative in some particular cases, but by and large, by a wide margin, people were interested in it. Where I found it particularly helpful, I would say, is actually in one-on-ones, because when you're having a one-on-one with someone, it's one thing to look at a screen, but when you're looking at a screen, Zoom fatigue is a real thing, and I really, really hate it, because apart from anything else, where are you looking? Where is your attention? It's not on the person. I can look at Chris, and Chris knows I'm looking at him because I'm looking at him, not just kind of like down at his navel or any other kind of like part, which you have to do in kind of like a Zoom situation. So having a one-on-one inside of a VR, in a VR setting, having it in a VR game also works, because you fire off, it becomes more real, it becomes more kind of lifelike, like you would be going for a coffee, or like you would be going off and picking up some darts, throwing them at a dartboard inside of an office. It's that analog that I really appreciate about what VR brings to the table.
Good point.
How many people at your organization are using VR?
We are a small company. We are less than 50, and as far as kind of like daily active users, it's on the small side. It's like maybe 5 to 10. Broader than that, there's particular instances and particular activities that we do kind of brought them in more on a monthly kind of basis. For now, it takes work.
It's one of the things I think with VR that is a challenge is when you try to explain to someone that you're working in virtual reality, they immediately think, oh, you work on VR, you're a programmer that works on VR. I'm like, no. I work in virtual reality and do this. What kind of pushback have you seen in the enterprise environment? Because I have a couple of customers who are talking about getting into VR, and the challenge is always, am I just buying my guys toys?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I have a really perfect example for that. So a couple weeks ago, I went into the office, and one of the girls there, she had talked about VR a few times, but she hadn't really used it much. But I was sitting at my desk in an open workspace and had immersed up and running, had my 4 screens up that I was using to work. And I was like, do you want to see what I see? And she's like, oh, sure. So I streamed what I was seeing from my headset to my browser on the laptop, which was on the desk. And she came over and looked at it. I had full pass-through on. And I looked at her and she said, oh, that's me on your screen. And I'm like, yep. And I'm like, look at this. And I showed her the 4 screens, and she was just amazed. She was like, you can do all that in there? And I'm like, yeah. And I resized the screens. I moved them forwards and backwards and showed her how I could move the windows around. And she's bringing her headset into the office now so she can start working in VR. It was just, until they actually saw it, it was like once she saw how it worked, she was like, I'm in. Can you help me get this set up when I bring it into the office?
There's no other way. There's no other way.
Yeah.
You can't talk your way into this. You got to kind of like pilot it small. You got to show it. And indeed, the founders of the company were justifiably skeptical. And honestly, they were only going along with this because I was so passionate about it, and they wanted to humor me, and they figured it was just going to fizzle out just like that. But then, I ordered them the headset, got it delivered, got them onboarded, and the first meeting that they had completely changed their view on it, bought them into it 100%, and it was like, you can't talk it, you got to show it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm curious, Eviju, do you think you could build a non-VR related business from scratch using virtual reality as the medium? On that?
We could talk about that in a future episode. But Jeff Weiser from Go to Market has basically created his business all in VR, and all of his coworkers that he works with and people it's all in VR. He's gotten business leads playing walkabout mini golf that turned into accounts for him, and he's had conversations with people in Immersed that led to different business opportunities. He'd be a great person to elaborate on that specifically, for sure.
So Ron, yours is a bit of a unique situation in that you work both remote and in an office in your VR headset. So you're already around people, but you go into virtual reality as well at the same time?
Yeah. So it's a little bit unique. And it kind of spawned because of similar reasons to like Cliff was saying. During lockdowns and stuff like that, I found that I was missing that connection to my coworkers. And when I'm working during the day, it's great to be home. Like I've got my wife here, we've got our dogs, but it was also very disruptive from the aspect of she couldn't tell if I was in a meeting. There's just all this disruption that's happening. So I started going into the office, but no one else was in the office. There was literally not another soul in the building. So I explored going into a public room one day because I'd been working in Immerse kind of off and on using the multiple screens, but I went into the cafe and there was people in there and I'm like, okay, this is kind of weird. I didn't really know how to interact if I wanted to interact, but then I started overhearing.
You were kind of shy there in the beginning.
Yeah, I was totally off to the side. Yeah.
It's intimidating at first.
It totally is. Yeah. And I started hearing some conversations of other people. And I'm like, oh, I'm interested in that too. So I kind of said a little bit, kind of quiet, seeing if anybody could hear me, and somebody responded. I'm like, oh my God. Whoa. Okay, we could have this conversation. But that evolved into me feeling so comfortable around all the other people in Immersed that I'm like, you know what? I'm going to continue going into the office with no one there and using the headset. And it has completely changed the way I work in the office without people there. And now we're going back into the office. We're consolidating space. So I'm going back into a physical office where there's going to be other people. And so it's a little bit awkward right now. Like the story where I showed the girl on my screen, there was another guy in the office, and between my virtual screens, I could see him kind of looking out of the corner of his eye, like, what is going on over there? Because I'm just kind of staring in his direction, but I'm reading my email. He has no idea. So it's going to be a little bit different, but going from just a single laptop to 4 screens, like I can't give up those 4 screens, whether I'm physically in an office or not. And
sure,
it's just going to be something. It's just going to be a way I work.
I love it. Well, what it makes me think of is when you remember when they first started having the Bluetooth in-ear little headsets where there was like a little microphone that kind of went down halfway down your cheek, right? People would wear those and walk down the sidewalk and talk seemingly to themselves. And that was the weirdest thing when that first came out. Like, what is wrong with that guy? You know, like you had this really bizarre reaction to it. Well, over time, it got more and more normalized and more and more normalized. And then now AirPods are so small, like a lot of times you don't even see them. So if I'm in an airport or walking down the street and I see somebody walking by themselves, just talking out loud, having a conversation, I don't think anything of it. Because it's like, oh, they have some device and they're talking to somebody. They're not like a psycho, right? So like, I think that with the VR headsets, right now we're in that stage where it's the really awkward, weird thing on your ear, and people are like, what is that thing? You know, fast forward, I don't know what the timeline is, a year, 3 years, 5 years, whenever, at some point, it'll be more normalized, and people will see headsets and AR and mixed reality devices, and they won't think anything of it. It'll be more normalized.
Yep.
Right now, it's very bleeding edge stuff.
Yep. Well, and I do think that the more people that see the value add, the more people will be willing to accept the inconvenience of the headset. And it isn't frictionless right now to get into working or anything, but it's way better than it was even like 3 or 4 months ago. So it's just it's improving constantly. But I think it's just as people see that value add, for me, I see the value add and I'm like, that is way more than the inconvenience of it.
I was going to say, I came into this pretty recently, and I'm probably the least technical person in this group. I'm a seller, but I sell a sales enablement technology. And what's amazing to me is the improved efficiency and the potential to really blow up the sales enablement space. That's the part I happen to know. But I know there's analogies in every single profession, in every single industry. And so, I love the fact that you all have put together this sort of program to start sensitizing people to what the power of the technology is, because it's going to be those individual use cases, in my opinion, that pulls each person into the metaverse, because they're going to recognize that if they don't, they're going to get left behind.
Yep.
Yeah. So how long have you been using VR, Xander, or at least immersed in this? I think you are pretty new. I don't think I'm
pretty new. So my son, the reason I got into it was my son was living with us, and he left to move not far from you in June. And so for the first 6 months or so, we would meet in Big Screen or some other apps to just have family time. And then it's been just a couple months that I decided to really get into immersed, and everything that you've all described, the sense of community has been incredible. Ryan's been a tremendous, I call Ryan Ryan and Jeff together, my metaverse Sherpas. But it's
Perfect.
the best, Yeah, I mean, immersed customer support is great, but it's the community. I just have to ask a question in a common room, and it's a lot faster than looking at an FAQ, and everybody's happy to help. And as I learn more, I'll certainly help others. I'll give back when I can.
And Xander, one of the cool things that you said at the beginning is that you're not a tech person. And I think one of the exciting things about working in VR is that most people, or a lot of people that work in VR, are not even working on VR or tech-based applications. Right? A lot of people are working in here for sales or video editing or being an author. Right? A lot of people that work in here are not programmers. I personally have never even finished a Python or a programming class in my life, right? And a lot of people haven't. That's the exciting thing about all of this.
100%.
I was gonna say, if you're a little bit conscientious out in the public of wearing your headset, kind of go along with what Ron was saying, the best place I found to do it is on the ski slopes. Everybody's got this big thing on their face.
You just better have full
The keyboard's
on is all I gotta say.
The keyboard's a little suspect going down the hill, though. You gotta be careful with that.
So moving along with the people here that we want to talk to, Chris, I see you in the public rooms all the time. I mean, you're one of the first people I met in VR. What brought you in here? Because I just know you from conversations, and we rarely talk about work or anything else. We just shoot the breeze all day. But I'd kind of like to know your story there.
I bought 2 Quest Pros at Christmas of 21. I live in Arizona and Iowa, and my lovely lady's in Iowa, so we brought headsets to feel closer while we're apart. And in that process, I was looking at productivity apps, and I watched all kinds of videos, and I'm sure I watched one of yours. I can't remember who I watched, and read all kinds of articles. And I tried, virtual desktop and all of them. And I tried immersed as well. And at the time it was a subscription service, and I was just really struggling with it. I had a Discord account from like 2012, and I couldn't remember the login, so I didn't mess with the Discord. I was just trying to figure it out, which was a mistake. So I went off and I did work rooms for a little bit, and that wasn't really cutting it. So I came back to Immerse, signed up for the subscription, really put in the effort to figure it out, created a new Discord account, and really started to embrace the positives of the multiple screens. And for me is more about the community. I'm rarely in a solo room. I'm more about the public rooms, and you know, you can mute yourself or you know, go to a seat that's far away from everybody else if you need to sit down and focus. But for me, it was more about working from home with other people and having that interaction and not caring if they're not working at all as long as they're there. You know, like we have some guys that do a lot of real life work, like Hattie. He does a lot of real life work, and he'll come in, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't turn on his computer. He just comes in there to shoot the breeze and you know, talk for a little bit and disrupt everybody's workflow. But it's that kind of that would happen in an office too. You know, there's always that guy that comes in and tells a story about something, and it's intriguing, and it takes you away from your stuff for a little bit, but it also kind of re-energizes. So yeah, I put in a lot of hours. I do all my work in Immersed, and we do meetups when I'm here, and Kate's in Iowa. We'll do meetups in a collaboration room, and like a couple nights ago, I shared a screen and we did the Wordle together, and the Daily Mini, and the New York Times on a shared screen. You know, stuff like that you can't do very easily anywhere else is pretty cool. So
nice. A particular theme that keeps coming up here is what we're lacking, and what we're finding here is serendipity.
Yeah.
Which is just a given. You know, you just get that when you kind of like you are together in large groups or small groups. It just happens. It can't not. You take it into a you take it into a remote sense from a work perspective, and all that stuff just it's not there. You have to do so much work to try and find that serendipity, and yet here it's baked in, because as soon as you come into that public room, you know, whether you like it or not, you're going to get that experience. Now, this is with, you know, co-working and working alongside people who you're not working with in your real job. But man, there's no reason why you can't have both. You know, this whole public rooms is existing, and over time, as more people from companies kind of like get on board with this, you will have your individual private rooms for your actual work, and you will have the ability to get some like broader scale serendipity across teams and across people and across companies and across countries. So it's just all in the same place, and you don't have to give up anything to kind of do it. In fact, you don't even have to commute to get it, which is fantastic.
You said something really interesting there, just real quick, and I'll turn it over to Chris. You said, you know, across countries and whatnot. And one thing that happened to us all, very, very interesting thing that happened to us very recently is one of the sort of, there's a group of people that is kind of the regulars, as it were, in the public rooms, people who are very frequently there, and you get to know them, right? Well, one of the people that's a regular is a guy named Tristan, and he lived in Tennessee. And we'd see him every day, and we'd work alongside him. We'd have conversations or whatever. Well, he and his wife and their son just moved to Taiwan, and they're literally halfway around. Sorry?
Thailand.
I keep doing that. Forgive me, Tristan.
Dave, you don't even know, because it's the same thing when you're in here. Whether it's Taiwan, Thailand, Tennessee, it doesn't matter. We don't know.
And that is the point. Is we see him in the public rooms now, just like we always have, but instead of being in Tennessee in the real world, he's in Thailand. Excuse me, sorry about that, Tristan. But it's just the fact that geography means nothing in virtual reality is an incredible side effect to this. We don't know if Chris is in Arizona or Iowa, so it doesn't. It's really an interesting phenomenon. That's what I was going to say. I think I interrupted you, Chris.
One other thing I was going to say was you know, I'm naturally introverted, but still I crave the co-working aspect that goes on in here. And I think that's the case. Everybody kind of talks about the social aspect once you get over that hump. it seems like that's a real positive experience. And I don't know why. It doesn't make sense really, but
it's kind of like being at a masquerade party, you know, where you've got a mask on and you are able to be more fluid in the way you interact with people because you're less self-conscious.
I wanted virtual screens. I've always thought it would be cool to have these floating monitors in front of me, and I've been VR curious for a decade and just really wanting this to be a thing. But it felt like the technology just wasn't there. And then it was, and I mentioned at the beginning there, it was your video, Dave. I had seen somehow Immersed had popped up into YouTube, and I saw something about it, and then I started Googling, or not Googling, looking on YouTube for other people who are actually using Immersed or similar apps to work. And I saw your video, and you did a whole video about ergonomics in VR and how it had just kind of changed the way that you worked. And I was like, I have always been a multi-monitor person. I want to get in and have these multiple floating monitors. I mean, when COVID hit, I knew that I wouldn't be able to work from inside my house because my wife and kids would be home, and that just wouldn't work. So I went and bought a 29-foot travel trailer and turned that into my office and parked it in the yard. And that was great for, 2 years. But then I discovered this working in virtual reality thing from your video, and I joined in, and you said it, and I think all of us have kind of hit on this, or at least hinted around to it, that the big surprise wasn't just these floating screens in front of me that I thought I wanted. The big surprise was all of you guys. It was coming in and realizing that it's not about the technology. VR for me was about the technology when I got into it. In the end, after having been here for almost 6 months, I found that it's about the interaction. It's about the people. And I think that is probably the biggest takeaway for me is when you tell someone working in VR, they talk about it being such an isolated experience because you're not interacting with people around you. But when you work from home, there is no one around you. But working in virtual reality, I got that interaction. So I came to VR for floating screens. I'm staying in VR because I've just made really good friends and had such a good experience. Floating screens, they're totally the bonus. You guys keep me in here every day.
It is that's the exact way I think of it. It is a perfect example of I came for the tech and I stayed for the people, right? It is a cliche example, and it's spot on. It's completely spot on. And Jeff, I'm also glad that you mentioned again, the reason why you hopped in here was because you saw Dave's video on YouTube, and I was the exact same way. I told Dave this when I met him in person. The reason why I first learned about working in VR was from Dave's YouTube video on ergonomics. And what's even cooler about it is Dave wasn't a 20-year-old kid that's like, I'm working in VR. Dave's a 50-year-old man with a dad belly.
That's right.
That was the most shocking part of it. Exactly. That was the cool part. And it just shows that you don't have to be a 20-year-old kid to be working in VR. Most of the people that actually work in here are, not 20 years old. Dave's 52. Michaela's had a whole corporate career. Ron's had an entire career, 20 plus year at Microsoft. Most of you guys, I'm sure, have all worked for a long time. Chris, another example. To everyone here, right? That's the cool thing. It's not kids, right? So there's no excuse of like, oh, I'm too old, right? Because that's not what it's about. So I don't know. It's kind of my 2 cents.
Yeah, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. If you're watching this podcast for the first time, which it would have to be the first time, this is our first episode, we're hoping to put out more of these. This is something that we're really passionate about. It was an idea that sparked from a conversation in one of the public rooms. We hope to do more, and what we really hope more than anything else is that we'll see you joining us someday in virtual reality. And until next time, this is VR 9 to 5, and we're hoping to take you guys someday beyond the monitors and see you in VR.